What did you just say? I couldn't believe the words that came out of John's mouth, and I asked him again with a trembling voice. Didn't you hear? You know the land from the family home you inherited, right? I've decided to build a house there. John spoke with casualness as if he was just mentioning he'd bought bread from a store. The new house is going to be so stylish. You won't even be able to compare it to the old one. It'll blow your mind. Huh? As I failed to grasp the situation, John said with a mocking laugh. My mistress and I are moving in next month. You need to disappear. With that one sentence, something inside me snapped. I quietly accepted the divorce papers with a lawyer's contact that John handed to me. Sorry to trouble you, but can you contact this lawyer by tomorrow? I have my reasons and I need it done quickly. All right, I wish you happiness. I did as told, contacted the lawyer, and proceeded with the divorce process. John was delighted, almost jumping for joy, as his plans proceeded without a hitch. However, a few months later, he would come to me in a state of sheer panic. My name is Susan Clark, 55 years old. I used to be a nurse, but now I'm a homemaker. Actually, this marriage was my second. My first marriage was when I was 26. I got married because I found out I was pregnant. But when my daughter Marisa was 3, he told me he had fallen in love with someone else. It was a shock, but part of me oddly accepted it. There had been many signs of incompatibility since we were dating, and even though we married because of the pregnancy, the divide only deepened. After our divorce, I raised Marisa alone while working as a nurse until she graduated from college. Once Marisa started her own life, I decided it was time to live mine. I met John Clark at a matchmaking party soon after that thought. I was 48 and thought it would be nice to have a partner to share my life with, so I started attending these events. He was 5 years my senior, financially stable, and looked younger than his age. He took a liking to me, we went out a few times, and eventually we started a formal relationship and decided to marry. Since Marisa was living on her own, John and I started our married life together. He was also divorced, had separated from his wife a long time ago, and hadn't considered remarriage until he was 53. When I asked why he decided to remarry now, he would only say, just felt like it. Since we got married, I took on all the household duties, because that's what John wanted. He was busy running his business and wanted me to quit my nursing job to take care of the home, which was his condition when he proposed. John seemed very satisfied. Satisfied with my homemaking, especially my cooking, which he always complimented. John was demanding, but since I had quit my job and we lived comfortably on his earnings, I wasn't really dissatisfied until that moment. 5 years passed peacefully in our marriage. During that time, my father fell ill and passed away at the age of 80. He had been living alone, about an hour's drive from our place. My mother passed away when I was in high school, and since I left home after my first marriage, my father had been living alone in the family home. I had suggested living together, fearing he might be lonely, but he always declined with a laugh, saying he preferred being on his own. After marrying John, we didn't live with my father because he was against it. I frequently visited my childhood home to check on my father, but he suddenly fell ill and passed away. I deeply regretted not noticing sooner, and I grieved for a long time without letting John know. There wasn't much inheritance, just the family home filled with memories, a cozy wooden house. It was something my father had commissioned from a local carpenter. The house was now vacant, and I couldn't bear to demolish it, so I often went back to maintain it. One day something happened. After seeing John off at the front door in the morning, I was about to do some laundry when I noticed something strange. Huh? I couldn't lift my left arm. It seemed that one side of my body was paralyzed. Scared, I called John with my trembling right hand. His irritable voice came through. What do you want? How many times have I told you not to call me at work? I said, listen, my left hand suddenly won't lift. It seems paralyzed. John replied indifferently, paralyzed? What do you expect me to do about it? If you're worried, just go to the hospital. I said, I know, but I'm worried about it. Could you accompany me? Filled with anxiety about my body's unusual condition, I pleaded with John, but he grunted with annoyance. He said, I can't. I'm swamped right now. If you can't make it to the hospital on your own, you should call an ambulance. Despite my disappointment at his lack of concern, I hung up and called an ambulance. When I described my symptoms, they exclaimed, "That's serious," and took me to a major hospital. It seemed I had suffered a stroke, but since I was transported to the hospital quickly after onset, I didn't need surgery. Instead, I was treated with medication to dissolve the blood clot. Still, I was told I needed to stay in the hospital for the time being. As I lay in the hospital bed, the nurses kept asking, "Isn't your husband coming?" I mumbled something about him being busy. It was finally the end of John's workday when he called. "Hey, where are you? What about dinner?" I was surprised that his first concern was dinner. Did he not remember I called him this morning? "I called you this morning. I'm in the hospital." "What? You're still at the hospital?" "You've been there for quite a while." His casual response infuriated me, and I told him about the stroke. "Stroke? Why would something like that happen?" "Got it, I'm on my way," he finally said, sounding alarmed, and he came to the hospital. He visited my room, only to quickly go and speak to the doctor. Later, I overheard the nurses talking outside my room. "Did you hear about the stroke patient's husband today?" One of them asked. He kept asking the doctor if his wife would have another stroke. He said he couldn't handle it if she became bedridden. How awful is that? I knew they were talking about John. He was more worried about how my condition would affect his life than my health itself, and I sighed deeply. After that day, I continued my hospital stay, but John never showed up again after handling the paperwork on the first day. "Mom, I'm here." Marissa's bright voice came from the doorway, her smile shining. "Sorry to have you bring me things like clothes. You must be busy with work, right?" "It's no big deal," Marissa smiled back. "Don't worry about anything. You've worked hard your whole life, so just relax while you're here." I apologized repeatedly, and I was wishing John had been the one to help, but it turned out he had asked Marissa to do it. "I'm slammed with work, so could you take care of it?" He had told her. His attitude infuriated me, but he had said, "You owe it to your mother for raising you on her own. It's only natural for a daughter to look after her. Are you okay, Mom?" Marisa looked at me. Her concern was more about having such a husband than about my health. I felt a twinge of worry about John's attitude, but I thought he must be struggling at home without me, so I let it slide. "I'm fine, no need to worry," I assured her with a smile, squeezing her hand. But when I returned home, I was met with a shocking sight. I had expected the house to be a mess, yet it was spotlessly clean with no laundry in sight. But something was off. In John's bedroom, I detected the sweet scent of a woman's perfume. The conclusive evidence, however, was the long hair strand and a single earring dropped conspicuously on the floor. John was cheating on me. His lack of concern for my illness was bad enough, but to bring someone into our home while I was hospitalized was unforgivable. I decided to confront him. "I'm home," John called from the entrance, but I didn't go to greet him. "Hey, Susan, you're home, aren't you? What's the deal not coming to greet me?" He snapped from the foyer. Ignoring his voice, he entered the living room. I couldn't see his face from where I was, but I heard him drop his bag and approach. "Hey, have you gone deaf too? Greet me when I get home. Who do you think you are?" I couldn't stay silent anymore, turning to face him. "Who do I think I am? You didn't show up during my hospital stay or even pick me up when I was discharged. What about you?" John looked taken aback by my confrontational stance. "What's with this attitude? Who do you think pays for all this?" I showed him the earring I had found. "What's this?" John furrowed his brow for a moment, but when he realized they were women's earrings, he fell silent. His expression was unreadable. I pressed on. "You know what else is weird? How can you, who's never lifted a finger to do housework, keep this place so spotless?" John had divorced when he was young and had been single ever since, but it seems that until he turned 53, his mother took care of all the household chores. Even after remarried, he never helped with the housework. I was flabbergasted once when I realized he didn't even know how to use a vacuum or a washing machine. "Are you cheating on me?" I asked. John let out a heavy sigh, and then he started to chuckle. "What's so funny?" I wondered, trying to make him feel guilty, but it seemed he didn't feel a speck of it. "What's with the attitude?" "So what if I am cheating?" "What? It's a good time to tell you. You can't stay in this house anymore. I couldn't comprehend what he was saying. What do you mean? I've decided to sell the house. It's gotten pretty old. What are you talking about? Where are we supposed to live then? The sudden turn of events left me struggling to keep up. But this was just the beginning. John dropped a bombshell. You have that land you inherited, right? I'm gonna build a house there and live with my mistress. What did you just say? I couldn't believe what John had just said, and I stood there dumbfounded, looking at him. Didn't you hear me? You have that land from the family home you inherited, right? I've decided to build a house there. He spoke with the casualness of someone saying they bought bread from a store. What are you talking about? My family home is there. What about it? Oh, that outdated house? I don't care for it, so I had it demolished. What? I was stunned by the outrageous news, unable to process it. Yet John was shamelessly bragging about the house currently being built. The new house will be so stylish, you'd be surprised. What? Stylish or not, I couldn't care less about a house built on the site of my demolished family home. John looked at me with a mocking expression and said with a sneer, "Mistress moves in next month. You need to disappear." That was the last straw for me. I suddenly felt calm and just stared at the man laughing hideously before me. John was going on about something, but I couldn't take any of it in. I quietly accepted the divorce papers with a lawyer's contact he handed me. Sorry to rush you, but could you contact the lawyer by tomorrow? I have my reasons for needing it done quickly. His brazen voice didn't stir a thing in me. Fine. Best of luck to you. I did as told and proceeded with the divorce. John seemed almost to jump for joy that his plan was going forward. But a few months later, John would come to me in a frenzy. After the divorce, I immediately told Marissa that I had split with John and was single again. Then she said, "Actually, I'm relieved. I'll take care of Mom, so don't worry." I laughed and told her, "Don't be silly, I'm not old yet. I plan to keep working as a nurse, so you've got nothing to worry about." Yes, after divorcing with John, I had gone back to nursing. It felt rewarding whenever patients thanked me. A stark contrast to the grumbles from John while I was doing household chores. I was enjoying my single life, but 3 months after divorcing, John showed up at my apartment. I turned off the TV at the loud banging on my door and went to see who it was. Peeking through the door's viewer, I saw John looking desperate. "Who is it?" I asked. "Please, it's me. Susan, please open up." I almost wanted to retort that I didn't know any Susan, but it seemed too foolish. So I opened the door, keeping the chain on just in case. John's face, shining with sweat and his eyes darting around, was illuminated by the light from the slightly opened door. "What do you want now after all this time?" I asked. "Oh, how dare you speak to me like that after what you've put me through?" John accosted me with bloodshot eyes. I responded calmly to his heated words. "What are you talking about? I haven't done anything to you. You knew, didn't you, that there was a mortgage on that property, and you kept it hidden from me without saying a word." John was yelling desperately, but I couldn't help but laugh at his words. "Of course I wouldn't tell you. After all, I'm the one who inherited it." I implied to him that he should have known such a thing. Given John's old-fashioned ways, he probably thought that a wife's property belonged to her husband. But that notion was a mistake. When I pointed this out, John, exasperated, screamed and tore at his hair. Damn it, if I had known there was a mortgage, I wouldn't have changed it into my name. Yes, John had changed the deed of the inherited land into his name by forging a power of attorney from me. Then, he had my family home torn down and built a new house to live in with his mistress. However, that land had been collateral for the purchase of my parents' house. When my parents could no longer pay the mortgage, the plan was to sell that land and use the proceeds for the payments. It's a common practice, as land often comes with a mortgage when taking out a home loan. But now, with life insurance, linked to the group credit, if the person taking out a mortgage dies, the debt can be canceled. Unfortunately, my father had not subscribed to such insurance. The mortgage on my family home was still outstanding, and I was undecided about taking on that debt. In the meantime, John had changed the land into his name and demolished my family home without my consent. "It's your own doing whatever you want without telling me." Got what you deserved, right? So what's up? Did you get a notice of foreclosure or something? I asked with a cold look, and John blurted out something shocking. It's not just a notice. The land has been auctioned off, and before I knew it, it was sold to someone I don't know. And now I have to leave that land. I couldn't believe it had been auctioned off and sold. The situation had progressed beyond my imagination. I insisted the house was mine, but some scary guys started showing up. As a result, I couldn't live there and was driven out. John said weakly, but I had not expected his situation to be so dire. Still, I felt no sympathy for John and actually felt a sense of schadenfreude. You keep talking about yourself, but what about your cheating partner? Weren't you planning to live with her? I felt a disconnect with John's words, always saying I instead of we. Then John's face grew even more haggard and he sighed deeply. I was deceived. She was like a woman in it for the inheritance chase. Excuse me? Is it for the inheritance chase? She approached me knowing I was a CEO and had money aiming for my assets, but I had nothing valuable left. John's words took me by surprise. What? Wasn't your company doing well? John shook his head weakly. No, actually, just before you were hospitalized, I was betrayed by someone, and my company ended up in serious debt. Is that so? This was news to me. According to John, the debt was astronomical, so much so that even throwing all his assets at it wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't cover it. That's why the company went bankrupt shortly after we split up. And you still thought it was a good idea to build a new house? I was genuinely astounded, and John looked up almost pleadingly. I didn't want to build a house, really. If there was any money left from selling my house, I'd rather use it to rebuild the company. But Jane just wouldn't stop nagging about wanting a house. Jane was the mistress in question. John said she was 36, but looked so young and beautiful she could pass for someone in her 20s. Given the 24-year age gap between 60-year-old John and her, one would think he'd be suspicious of such a beautiful woman approaching him. John still thought of himself as hip and youthful, brimming with confidence, so it seemed he didn't notice. So you built her a house, huh? Yeah, but right after I built the house, my company went under, and when it turned out I was pretty much broke, Susan totally flipped on me. She had the nerve to say things like, "If you're an old geezer with no money, I want nothing to do with you." Can you believe that? He must have been really stung by being ridiculed like that. John's eyes welled up with frustrated tears as he told me his story, but I felt nothing. I couldn't help but think it was his own fault for being taken in by such a superficial woman and kicking me to the curb. Don't you see you're not at fault here? Did it ever strike you as odd that a young, beautiful woman who's perfect at housekeeping would fall for a man 24 years her senior? When I pointed that out, John just scoffed. Perfect at housekeeping? You must be joking. When you were in the hospital, she kept my place tidy and cooked meals, but she hired a cleaning service for all of it. Once we started living together, she didn't work, lounged around at home all day, and didn't lift a finger to help. Yet she always found time to pamper herself. She was something else. Oh, really? It was clear he had only looked at her surface. And where are you living now? I asked, and John's face turned sheepish. In a cheap apartment near the old house. It was the only place I could get. I remembered the apartments near the old house. They were old and run down with flaking metal walls that were quite a sight. I never would have imagined John, who once lived so comfortably, ending up in such a dilapidated place. It's winter now, isn't it? The place isn't insulated, so it's freezing in there. He said almost as if he was seeking pity. Your place looks much warmer. How come you're living here? Did you go back to nursing or something? The sudden shift to asking about my life made me uncomfortable, and I couldn't hide my distaste. That's none of your business. Why are you asking? Before I could finish, John was begging. Please, what the heck? Would you consider starting over with me? I've missed you every day since we split. It hit me that the one I truly love is you. His unexpected plea left me bewildered. Did he really think I'd happily return to him just because he declared his love? John's gross misunderstanding made me sick to my stomach. He was completely disregarding my feelings. I'm sorry to say, but hearing I love you from you is the last thing I want. It's downright creepy. Why not? Don't say that. I dodged as he clung to the door. Besides, who would believe that you love me? It's not a lie. I really do need you. Need, huh? Sure, I guess you do need me. After all, you started thinking about remarriage at 53, the same age your mother passed away. When I mentioned that, John fell silent. You never told me what sparked your interest in remarrying, but it was because your mom was gone and you had no one to take care of you, wasn't it? Oh no, that's not it. John replied with a forced smile, but his voice was faint. You say you need me, but what you really need isn't me, specifically. You just need someone to take care of you. That's not true. Don't jump to conclusions. John sat in proper posture, a sickly, ingratiating smile spreading across his face. It's not a conclusion without basis. When I had a stroke, you rushed to the hospital and went straight to consult with my doctor, didn't you? I know what you asked him. John had been grilling the doctor about whether I would end up bedridden and in need of care in the future. When I confronted him with that, his face turned pale as he muttered, "Why would you bring that up?" and started making excuses, saying, "It's not like that, I was just worried about you." Liar, you just didn't want to be saddled with taking care of me, did you? I know why you stopped visiting me. You wrote me off as old after seeing me have a stroke, didn't you? And then you chased after a much younger mistress. After all, the purpose of your marriage was to find someone to care for you in your old age. I had seen right through John's thoughts. Perhaps the affair with Marissa had been going on without my noticing long before. But I'm sure the decision to leave me and choose Marissa happened after I collapsed. He chose a younger and healthier mistress over a wife with health concerns. While John was trembling with guilt, I told him, "I'm sorry, but I have no intention of ever getting back together with someone who could so coldly think of abandoning me while I was suffering without a shred of concern." Even as he tried to cling on, I called the police in front of him. "Hello? There's a strange person loitering outside my house." When I said that, John snapped. "All right, I'll leave," and vanished. After that, it was one disaster after another for John. That new house he built, of course, was still being watched by those intimidating men, making it impossible for him to return. But the house, designed to impress Marissa by a popular designer, still had a mortgage on it, and it seemed the payments were falling behind. If someone would buy the house, it seemed like his problems would be solved, but according to the intimidating landowner, there's talk of demolishing John's house, eventually leveling the lot and putting the land up for sale. Even if the house is torn down, the mortgage remains, a truly tragic situation. John seems to have neither the energy nor the money to start a new business, and is now just getting by with temp jobs and part-time work. Mentally and physically exhausted, he no longer resembles the prosperous man he once was. In fact, he looks older than his years now. As it turns out, the failure of John's previous marriage was also due to him throwing his weight around and behaving like a tyrant. He's always been the same, considering anything other than himself as trivial. That's why he was betrayed at work, choosing a mistress over his wife based on self-interest, and then betrayed by that mistress, leading him to this predicament. I doubt anyone will reach out to help him now, yet I don't feel a speck of sympathy for John. As for me, lately Marissa has moved into my apartment, and we've been living together happily. Her workplace is close to my apartment, and she said it was a waste to pay rent for a separate place. But I knew that she decided to live with me because she was concerned about my health. She seemed to be worried about how I was coping after my stroke and divorce from John. But no need to worry. I've been keeping up with regular checkups at the clinic, and have even improved my lifestyle. Lately I've been feeling great. I've completely forgotten about John, and he hardly ever crosses my mind now. When I was hospitalized, John never visited me, but the nurses were so kind and became a source of support. Now, working as a nurse myself, I strive to be as supportive to others as I was once helped. I'm looking forward to going to the spa with Marissa. My life is still very much ahead of me. Why were you alone in the car? I was told to wait quietly, so Grandma got out of the car, huh? How long were you in there? I don't know, about 1 cartoon's worth. It seems my mother-in-law, on a sweltering day, left my daughter in the car and went into a motel with her lover. It took me about 15 minutes to rescue my daughter, So she must have been trapped in the car for about 45 minutes, right? I can't forgive my mother-in-law for putting my daughter in such danger. Why are you here? My daughter and I confronted my mother-in-law and her lover in front of the motel. My car. Why would you do this? Upon seeing the state of her car, my mother-in-law rushed towards it, frantic. Now the real punishment begins. I am a 29-year-old office worker. My husband Jake is 2 years younger, and we had a shotgun wedding 3 years ago. Since it was a shotgun wedding, I was worried about the impression I'd make on both our parents and my in-laws. However, my worries were unfounded as both sets of parents were happy about our marriage and the grandchild. It seems that having a child before marriage isn't frowned upon as much anymore. After my maternity leave ended and I returned to work, my mother-in-law Mandy started taking care of my daughter Lily. I was anxious about how child-rearing would go, but thanks to Mandy it was resolved. Mandy's house is within walking distance, and she is a stay-at-home mom, so her schedule is flexible. She would come over around the time my husband and I went to work and would leave when we came home. Mandy, thank you for watching Lily. It's okay. I enjoy being with her. And I do it because I like it. Thank you so much. It really helps. I always tell you don't worry about it. Oh, but I can't come tomorrow. Sorry. It's okay. I've known about it, and one day we'll manage. I truly am saved by Mandy, and sometimes feel guilty for relying on her too much. Now, Lily goes to preschool, and when we are late from work, Mandy picks her up and waits with her at our place. Mandy drives Lily to preschool, and sometimes takes her places on the way back. So Lily spends a lot of time with Mandy and is quite attached to her. Do you like Grandma? Yeah, I like her. Though I rely on her, sometimes I feel a bit sad thinking Lily might like Mandy more than me. In preschool, it's common for a parent to pick up the kids, and some children aren't happy when their grandparent comes instead. But Mandy, only 51 and still beautiful, doesn't look like she could be a grandmother. The first time I went with Mandy to pick up Lily, the teacher mistook her for my sister. I'd like to boast about my beautiful mother-in-law, but as a woman, I felt a bit envious. I hear many people have mother-in-law issues, but Mandy and I have no problems at all. I consider myself blessed with family relations. However, this was a misconception, and I was unaware that a problem was starting to arise. Thankfully, today Mandy went to pick up Lily from preschool again. Or at least, that's what was supposed to happen, but when I finished work and got home, nobody was there. Jake probably hasn't returned from work yet. If Mandy and Lily aren't here, they must have gotten held up somewhere. They must have gone somewhere together. Usually, I wouldn't worry too much if Lily wasn't at home, as I would expect Mandy, her grandmother, to be with her. But today I am later than usual, and it is already 7 p.m. What should I do? Should I call Mandy to check in? But I always feel like I am rushing her back when she has been so good to look after Lily all the time. Would that be rude? As I was agonizing over whether or not I should call Mandy, Jake came home. I decided to consult with Jake about calling Mandy. It is already 7 o'clock. Don't you think we should call? Yeah, but Mom should be with her. Indeed, it's a tough call. How about we wait another hour? He suggested. Both of us felt hesitant to call Mandy right away, so we decided to wait a little longer. Then, 30 minutes later, Mandy and Lily came home. We're home. Look, I got another toy. Lily exclaimed. Oh, welcome back. We were worried about you, I said, relieved to see Lily's smile. Mom, if you're going to be late, at least give us a heads up, Jake said. I'm sorry we got stuck in traffic. I thought we'd be home shortly, so I didn't call, but it got so late. I'll be more careful next time, Mandy apologized. Mandy promised to be more cautious in the future. This should prevent the kind of worry we experienced today. Yet, after that, it gradually became more common for Mandy to return late when she took Lily out. I'm home. Today we had crepes, Lily said. Welcome back. Did you thank Grandma properly? I asked. Lily seems to enjoy her outings with Mandy, but recently it's becoming a source of anxiety for me. Mom, I've told you to let us know when you'll be late, Jake said. What's the big deal if we're a little late? I want to spend time with Lily too, Mandy retorted. Mandy, I truly appreciate you looking after Lily, but could you please answer the phone when we call? I tried calling several times today. I mentioned, well, sometimes I don't notice the phone or I might be driving and can't answer, Mandy explained. That's true. I'm sorry, I said, wondering if I had spoken out of turn. Mandy seemed a bit upset. Not wanting to spoil our relationship, I reflexively apologized. It seems Mandy doesn't intend to worsen our relationship either, and she said she'd pay more attention before leaving. Curious about where Mandy often takes Lily until late, I asked Lily about it. Lily, where do you usually go with Grandma? I inquired. The mountains? The castle? I'm not getting much from the conversation. Information from a 3-year-old can be vague. Maybe they're going for drives in the mountains or visiting amusement or heritage sites. Do you enjoy your outings with Grandma? I like it because she buys me lots of things, Lily said. Is Lily's affection tied not to Mandy's company, but to the things she gets? The more I ask, the more mysteries arise. Don't you have fun going to the mountains or playing in the castles? I prefer watching cartoons. Even though Grandma drives you around, let's try to cut down on the cartoons, okay? She's not driving. I watch while waiting for Grandma. Wait, does Grandma leave you in the car? For how long? I don't know. About 4 times through the cartoon's theme song. Lily seems to be saying it's about 4 episodes of a cartoon, which would mean about 2 hours. Lily has her own tablet for watching cartoons and learning. Something unthinkable when we were kids, but these days even 1.5-year-olds can use toy-type tablets, and Lily has been using one since she was 2. Piecing together the snippets I've heard from Lily, a dreadful thought has come to me. It appears that Mandy is leaving Lily in the car while she goes somewhere, and Lily is passing the time by watching cartoons on her tablet. While I can't believe Mandy would do something so irresponsible, I feel we need to talk to Jake about it. According to Lily, Mandy leaves her in the car and goes somewhere. I told Jake. I can't believe it. Would Mom do something like that? But if it's true that she's leaving Lily in the car, that's concerning. Right now, it's just a bit humid because of the rainy season, but it could be dangerous as it gets hotter in the summer. You're right to worry. Let's look into this. The next day, we confronted Mandy, the mother-in-law who had returned home late with our daughter Lily. Mom, did you take Lily out somewhere again today? I've called multiple times. Why don't you ever answer? Have I not said to contact us if you're going to be late? That topic again? I told you there are times I can't answer the phone, right? Also, I asked Lily and she said that you always leave her in the car. Is that true? What? Lily has, no, that's not true. Mandy was clearly flustered. We exchanged glances, silently confirming each other's conclusions. We can't leave Lily with you anymore. Wait a minute, why are you suddenly deciding this? We really appreciate you taking care of Lily, up to now. But we just can't leave her with you if she's being left in the car. Please, let me be with Lily. I won't leave her in the car again. I'll make sure to come home early. Mandy clung to Jake, crying. Watching her, I felt a twinge of guilt. Knowing the care she had given Lily up until now, I thought maybe it was too extreme to suddenly not entrust Lily to her. Looking at Jake, I could see he seemed to share my sentiment. All right, you won't leave Lily in the car. You'll come home early. Promise me that. And if you break that promise, there won't be a next time. I understand. I'll absolutely keep my promise. After that, Mandy kept her word and started coming home early. Lily also confirmed that she wasn't being left in the car anymore. It was a relief that Mandy was a person who could be reasoned with. However, that relief was short-lived as a month later, she started coming home late again. Mom, we said there wouldn't be a next time. And yet you're coming home late again? I'm sorry. I'll be more careful from now on. I couldn't believe Mandy's words and looked at her coldly. Looking at Jake, I could tell he felt the same. We can't leave Lily with you anymore. How can you say that? What will happen to Lily if I don't go pick her up? There are other options like after-school programs or babysitters. That's terrible. It's pitiful for Lily. Let me go pick her up. Mandy's tantrum, like that of a child, left us bewildered. Still, we had already given her a chance, and Jake firmly stated, we said there would be no next time, right? The discussion is over. Some may think us cold-hearted, but if they knew Mandy had left Lily in the car, they might think we were too slow to act. I'm on the side that thinks we were too slow. Perhaps even today, Lily was left in the car. I regretted that I had been too considerate because it was Mandy who had cared for Lily until now and had not said what needed to be said. After that, Mandy tried to visit Lily at our home several times, but each time Jake turned her away. It felt a bit cruel, but it seemed necessary to be tough about it. Since we no longer entrusted Lily to Mandy, we asked the kindergarten for extended care, and whoever of us, Jake or I, got home early would go pick her up. The earliest we could get her was around 6 p.m. That's about 2 hours later than before, and I worried about the mental strain on Lily. Mama, sorry I'm late. It's not late at all. I'm playing with friends, so it's okay even if it's later. That's not how it works, sweetie. Lily seems surprisingly okay. Maybe I was worrying unnecessarily. After about 2 weeks, we got used to the new routine of picking up Lily. I was hoping that our life would stabilize like this, but then a small problem arose. I'm going on a business trip from next Friday, so I'm counting on you to take care of Lily on the weekend. What? I've got to work this coming Saturday. Really? What should we do about Lily? If we act now, we should still be able to sign up for the one-day Saturday daycare. It only lasts until noon, so I'll just have to wrap up my work by then. Looks like we can manage this time. But it does worry me that we might not always be able to handle situations like this in the future. On Saturday, I hurried through my work and went to pick up Lily from kindergarten. But then a big problem occurred. How, Lily's mom? Your grandmother came to pick her up. What? That can't be right. I heard she was coming because both of your parents had to work. I didn't ask Mandy to pick her up. And how did she even know that I had left my daughter at daycare on a Saturday? As I was pondering this, I received a text on my smartphone. The message indicated that my daughter's life was in danger. Trying to keep my cool amidst the panic, I rushed to Lily's location. When I arrived, I was shocked. It was a motel, complete with a nearby mountain and a castle-like exterior. Was this what Lily meant when she said she was going to the mountain and castle with Mandy? I searched for Mandy's car in the parking lot, fighting off the panic. There it is. I ran over to Mandy's car. Lily was inside, so I first knocked on the window to check on her. She was conscious but drenched in sweat and clearly exhausted. It's late July, and I remember the weather report this morning warned of a continued heat wave. It must be over 95 degrees, and the car interior would be even hotter. How long had Lily been trapped inside? I couldn't forgive anyone for doing this to her. 2 hours after I arrived at the motel, Mandy emerged with a man I didn't recognize. She had a flirtatious look on her face as she hung on the man's arm. But when she saw me and Lily standing outside, her expression reverted to the usual grandmotherly face we knew. You two, what are you doing here? Seemingly in disbelief, Mandy glanced at the parking lot to check on her car. Seeing her car with shattered windows, she became hysterical. Oh no, my car. Why would you do this? There was no need to break the window. Mandy seemed oblivious to the gravity of her actions. To avoid further scenes, I made sure Mandy understood Lily was safe, then asked the motel staff to take Lily to their staff room. After ensuring Lily was safely inside, I let Mandy have it with all the anger I could muster. I had to break the window to rescue Lily as quickly as possible. When I found Lily in the car, barely responsive, I knew there wasn't a moment to lose. I threw a softball-sized rock at the driver's side window, the farthest from where my daughter was seated, and shattered it. Even though it was necessary, breaking the car window is something you don't expect to do every day, and my heart was pounding. Of course, the motel staff came running to see what the matter was. Initially, they were wary of me as a potential intruder, but after seeing my daughter's condition, they listened to my explanation. Once they understood the situation, they took us to a cool staff room and provided Lily with a cold compress and juice. Lily, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Can I have more juice? She perked up quickly after cooling down. I nearly burst into tears of relief. I'm so grateful to the kind motel staff. Now that Lily had recovered, I asked her what happened. Why were you alone in the car? Lily looked down silently when I asked why she was alone in the car. It seemed like Mandy might have told her to keep quiet. Lily often got treats and toys, probably as hush money, Did you get some juice from the motel staff? They said they want to hear your story. Grandma told me to wait quietly. Lily answered in a small, anxious voice without looking up. Don't worry. Everything's gonna be okay. I'll make sure you won't get scolded for this. How long were you in the car? For the duration of one cartoon. So after watching that cartoon, you contacted me, right? Yeah. It took about 15 minutes for me to receive the email and arrive at the motel, so Lily was probably trapped in the car for about 45 minutes in total. At first, the air conditioning had kept the car cool, but as the engine was turned off, the interior must have gradually heated up. Lily must have sent me an SOS text after she couldn't stand the heat inside the car once the cartoon had finished. It was an extremely hot day and the car could have turned into an oven in minutes, but fortunately the car was parked in the shade at the motel, which seems to have kept the air somewhat cooler. Still, the thought of what might have happened if I had been just a bit later sends chills down my spine. The motel staff listened to Lily's story with curiosity. I answered their implied question. This is why my daughter reached out to me for help. I showed them the screen of the tablet I had given Lily. This yellow icon is an app that lets you easily send a text to a preset location in an emergency. It's simple to use. Just open the app and tap this button here. It's set to send a text with the time and place to my phone. After Mandy first left Lily in the car, I warned her to be more careful next time and forgave her. But I couldn't just leave Lily in her care again without taking some kind of action. So I installed this app on the tablet just in case and taught Lily how to use it. For Lily, who is adept at using a tablet, operating this app was a piece of cake. That's how I ended up here at this love motel to rescue Lily and stand before Mandy right now. So, you wanted to take care of Lily just as an excuse to have the freedom to sneak around for your affair, huh? Saying you're going out to dine with friends every time you have an affair would eventually raise suspicions. But how did you know to pick up Lily from preschool today when it's Saturday? I thought I might be turned away, but I went to pick her up to take my granddaughter out. When I got there, no one was home and the house was empty. So I wondered if maybe the two of them had left Lily at preschool because of work. That's why I peeked into the preschool. And there was Lily. Your purpose wasn't really to spend time with Lily, was it? You just used her as a tool to cover up your affair, planning to lie later about wanting to play with her, right? My anger grew as I realized how Lily's life had been put in danger and how she had been used as a tool to conceal an affair. As I continued to scold Mandy, shrinking back more and more, the timid lover who had only been observing until now tried to interject into the conversation. I'm sorry, I was wrong too. Your story can wait. Though they mustered the courage to speak up, they shrunk back even more than Mandy at my sharp rebuke. Right now I'm talking to Mandy and I don't want to be disturbed. Don't you understand how dangerous it is to leave someone trapped in a car? But I did give her a drink, and it was only for a short time. What part of 2 hours seems short to you? In this heat, Lily was nearly at her breaking point, but I couldn't just bring her into the motel, obviously. But what kind of person takes a child to the scene of an affair? The responses I got back from Mandy started to seem so absurd that it felt pointless to continue arguing. This is beyond what I can handle. All right, enough with the excuses. Officers, I apologize for keeping you waiting. Eh? The police? After rescuing Lily, I had already called the cops. I asked if I could speak with Mandy before they came in, so the officers were waiting out of sight. Mandy's face turned pale when the cop showed up. And, by the way, her lover's face turned pale too. Isn't calling the police a bit much? Did I really do something so terrible? You'll realize just how bad what you did was when you're at the police station. Mandy and her lover were put in the patrol car and taken to the station. After seeing them off, I headed to the motel staff room where Lily was. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. I couldn't apologize enough to the motel staff, but they were all so kind, joking and telling me to come back with just my husband next time. I'm not usually one for risque jokes, but this time I felt no disgust, just relief that I wasn't scolded. Shall we go home, Lily? What about Grandma? She went home earlier with that man. So let's go home with Mom. Before leaving the staff room, I apologized. Mandy was facing multiple charges, including false imprisonment, kidnapping, and abuse. It seemed she took leaving Lily in the car too lightly, and my own awareness was also too lax. The final sentence was a year in jail. Mandy was charged with crimes beyond what I had imagined, and I was shocked. The most severe of her crimes was apparently false imprisonment, which carries no fine but only imprisonment. I learned a lot from the police. Mandy's affair had started last fall. However, she had met her lover about 3 years ago and had been pursuing him ever since. What was she thinking at her age? Lily had managed to get through the winter in the car with blankets and warm drinks. But trapping a child in a car is dangerous, no matter if it's winter or summer. I'm just glad she's okay. The lover was a 42-year-old man she met on a dating app. It seems they were buying my daughter things and keeping her quiet. The lover turned out to be married, and now Mandy was being sued for damages by his wife. My father-in-law had enough of Mandy's infidelity at the age of 51 and divorced her. Of course, we cut ties as well. So when Mandy gets out in a year, she'll be completely alone. She won't have anyone to rely on. We'll have to find a job and a place to live, and we'll lead a lonely life. Even after she gets out of jail, her hellish days won't be over. Thankfully, Lily seems fine and healthy even after being left in the car on a scorching day. But there's one problem. Aren't we going to the castle anymore? While Mandy and I were having our showdown outside the motel, it seems Lily was treated to a parfait by the staff. She wants to go back to the castle because she wants that parfait again. What kind of parfait was it? It was this big with a cherry on top. Well then, let's go get an even bigger parfait, the one that's covered with strawberries on top. That's how I always manage to distract her. I'm praying she'll forget all about the castle by the time she's older. Also, this incident has made me reflect on the need to treasure Lily more. So, I quit my job and switched to part-time work. Now I have more time with Lily, and we're enjoying peaceful, fun days. My mistress is pregnant, so I'm going to remarry. Please divorce me. I was completely expressionless at my husband's words. My husband was apologizing to me. What is he thinking? He's at an age where retirement is on the horizon. What's going on in his mind? I don't particularly mind divorcing. What's going on in his mind? I don't particularly mind divorcing. Our son, Michael, is independent, and I have my own savings. But I just can't stand the thought of everything going his way. I have my pride, too. The pride of someone who has kept the home for 30 years as a wife. Just watch, husband. I'll show you how serious I am. My name is Marcia, 53 years old. I've been working at a mid-sized company ever since I graduated from college. I took a few years off when Michael was born after marrying my husband, Nick, but aside from those few years, I've been working all my life. My husband is meek and not good at asserting himself, which is why he never climbed the corporate ladder. I, on the other hand, have become a manager, someone my colleagues rely on. Of course, there were those who envied my success. She's so bossy for a woman. She's been with the company for so long and thinks she owns the place. Really, I hear these words during breaks. I drink coffee without showing any reaction. At first I was shocked, but I've gotten used to it. I haven't done anything wrong. That's why my subordinates believe in me and follow my lead. Instead of gossiping, they should be working harder. It was as I finished my coffee that I heard it. My wife is bossy at home too. My son is on her side and I'm left out in the cold. That's tough. Recognizing the voice, I looked towards its source. From behind a potted plant's shadow, I saw. In the midst of a group speaking ill of me was my husband, and listening closely, it seemed like he was at the center of the trash talking. I always feel uncomfortable being compared to my wife. I'd hate to be compared to that thick-skinned person too. I might have married the wrong person. Who knew she would be like that? Sympathetic sighs rose from the group as my husband sighed. I was clutching my chest. There was no way I wouldn't be upset. My husband used to be a man of weak will. He joined the company a year after me and was sort of thrust upon me to look after, and as I taught him the ropes, we became close. Back then, he used to say he was envious of my abilities. Once we started dating, he would smile proudly about my competence. Not anymore, it seems. Now he resented my success and spread rumors about me. Since then, I started observing my husband's behavior at work more closely. He was always someone who preferred to avoid making waves. I wonder how he is at home. Hey, Marcia? I'm thirsty. All right. My husband won't walk to the fridge himself. He'd rather have me fetch him a beer. I can't remember him ever helping with the chores. At home, he's more overbearing than other husbands. Maybe he's just more of a homebody than most. Could you rub my shoulders? I'm tired. Yeah, I'm tired too, and he's been more dedicated to spreading gossip about me than his work. But he seems to get tired all the same. How about some snacks? Didn't you just ask for a shoulder rub? What do you think I'm capable of in 2 places at once? It'd be unbearable if there were more of you. He frowned. I was at a loss, but went to fetch some snacks anyway. If only he'd get them himself. In reality, he orders me around for everything. When I set out the snacks on the table, he prompts me to massage his shoulders again. I sighed deeply. My husband is not my ally. I'm reminded of that from time to time. Even when we go shopping on weekends, he hesitates in front of the produce section. He doesn't cook but stops at the sight of any sale sign. Which cabbage should we get? Well, the one you're holding in your right hand looks fresher. When I throw him a lifeline, he nods, but rarely follows through with my advice. Let's look up how to pick a fresh cabbage on my smartphone. Really? Then what was my opinion for? He accepts information from his smartphone readily. Rather, he's always messing with it whenever he has a moment. Susan sure is funny. He often laughs out loud looking at his screen. Susan the newbie? Yeah, the one I've been teaching. Got pretty attached to me. He boasts proudly. Sure enough, Susan frequently asks him for advice at work. Susan is a new employee and not very skilled. In a way, she resembles my husband in his younger days. You've become a mentor, I see. Well, I'm not as capable as you, but I've been at the company for a long time. I'm trying my best, and that's why Susan comes to me. My husband goes on a rant, his face turning red. I'm left speechless. He seems to take my words as criticism, although I had no intention of hurting him. Sorry, maybe I was a bit harsh. Your words always sting. Seemingly emboldened by alcohol, he becomes bitterly verbose. Susan's kind, you know. She appreciates and encourages me more than anyone. Quite unlike you. You seem quite fond of Susan. I married the wrong person. He suddenly raised his voice. It was so loud it seemed to fill the room. I should have married Susan. That would have saved me from this misery. Susan is quite young, isn't she? My husband is already 55, nearing retirement age. Even if he were single, it is unlikely that Susan would see him in a romantic light. That's what I thought. But then my mistress is pregnant, so I'm going to remarry. Please give me a divorce. I was stunned by his words. My husband was apologizing to me. The words mistress and the image of my timid husband oddly clashed in my mind. I was confused, but gradually the stark reality began to sink in. Though, it's Susan. We became close after she confided in me. Is Susan pregnant? Yes, my husband nodded. I just shook my head in disbelief. Please, I don't want Susan to think of me as an irresponsible man. You're plenty irresponsible to me, though. You're capable at work, and you could always go to Michael's place. But Susan only has me, my husband pleaded. I pondered for a moment. I didn't particularly mind divorcing, but I didn't like the idea of everything going his way. After being smeared by my husband, my reputation at work had taken a hit. Aside from my immediate team, it seems most people enjoy spreading rumors about me. Now, I would be labeled as the middle-aged woman who was dumped by her husband for a younger employee. That was unbearable. I had made up my mind. After a deep sigh, I said, "All right, goodbye then." Marcia, but let me make one thing clear. You'll probably be fired from the company. What? He cried out in astonishment. You're trying to scare me into staying married? That's not it. I won't do anything, I swear. But I can see it happening. That's a lie. You just don't want to divorce me. But it's too late. Marrying you was a mistake. I need someone who is kind and supportive, like Susan. He said it almost like a moan. When I signed the prepared divorce papers, my now ex-husband told me to pack my things. You're kicking me out? Yes. From today, this house will belong to Susan and me. There's no place for you here. I paid for most of the house, but I had no choice. I gathered my belongings and headed for the door. For the door, there was no one to see me off. I was alone on the night streets, wondering what to do next. For the time being, I moved to the park. Sitting on a swing, I killed time before calling my son, Michael. Michael was at a loss for words for a while. What's Dad thinking? Divorcing now of all times? It's okay. We weren't that close as a couple anyway. Could you come pick me up? I have nowhere to stay. Understood. I'll be right there. The call ended. True to his word, Michael arrived soon after. He emerged from his black car. Michael somewhat resembled his father in looks, but their personalities were completely opposite. Michael invited me into the passenger seat. While driving to his house, he still had a grim look on his face. Dad's really selfish. I'm so disappointed to say he's my father. Don't say that, I said with a wry smile. My patience for my ex-husband had worn thin, but it was a marriage born out of love at one point. Reflecting on the memories of our youth, it was complicated to hear him spoken of so harshly. The next day when I went to work, my ex-husband wasn't there. Nor was Susan to be seen. Just as I thought, I shrugged my shoulders. After finishing work and heading home, someone called out to me. It was my ex-husband. Marcia, what have you done? But I haven't done anything. I was fed up. My ex-husband seemed to be convinced that I had orchestrated some scheme. But that's a complete misunderstanding. Suddenly I'm fired? That doesn't make sense. I've dedicated myself to this company for years. I've been working hard for this company too, you know? That's something everyone who works here would think. Not just something for my ex-husband to be proud of. It's not just me. Susan's been let go too. My brother must have done it. Brother? My ex-husband's eyes widened. They must have met several times before, but he seemed oblivious. I crossed my arms and said, my brother is the president of this company. The predecessor was our father. What? He staggered. I watched silently as surprise and fear appeared on his face. You're part of the president's family? Yes, but I wanted to be a normal housewife, so I kept quiet about it. I didn't want to be fussed over just because I'm part of the president's family. I wanted to succeed on my own merit. As a result, I ended up being both admired and the subject of constant gossip. Yet the source of that gossip, my ex-husband said with a trembling voice, but you've climbed the ladder on my own strength. And if I had used my family's influence, you could have advanced too. He seemed at a loss for words. My brother is a strict man, and he had always assessed my ex-husband, his brother-in-law, based on his actual abilities. And he had said more than once that if it weren't for the family connection, he'd have wanted to get rid of someone as useless as my ex-husband. And now it seems that has become a reality. I warned you, didn't I? If we divorced, you'd be out of a job. But still to think. The president is my wife's brother. That's just absurd. Ex-wife, that is. I corrected him and started walking away. But my ex-husband followed persistently. Can't you talk to your brother for me? Susan and I are out of jobs, and at this rate, that's not possible. I kept walking without stopping. I've made a promise not to interfere with the company's management. But can't you just... No. Why don't you talk to my brother directly? There's no way I could do that. He looked scared, his gaze darting away as he left. A week has passed since then. For now, I'm staying at Michael's place, but I plan to find an apartment and live on my own soon. You know you're welcome to stay here, Mom. That won't do. It wouldn't be fair to your wife. I shook my head. Michael is married, and his wife has just had a baby. I can't impose on them for long. Right after I left Michael's house, my smartphone rang. It was my ex-husband. Again, I frowned. It had been like this all morning. He had been calling me non-stop. The call count was 39 times. Finally worn down, I answered. My ex-husband's voice was almost frantic, on the verge of tears. Marcia, you have to help me. I can't find a job. That's not my problem. But it is. Your brother seems to have spoken to other company bigwigs about Susan and me, and now I'm turned away everywhere I go. His voice was trembling, his breathing ragged. There's nothing I can say. I had no other words to offer. My brother must be really upset about this whole thing to go that far. Don't talk about it like it's someone else's problem. Because it is. I was perplexed and shook my head. In fact, we're strangers now, aren't we? We're not a couple anymore. That's not possible. I heard something crash over the phone. Right after, my husband let out a scream. It seemed like he had stumbled and hit the furniture. A woman's shrill scream could be heard as well. I assumed it was Susan. From my ex-husband's descriptions, I had imagined her as a kind and dedicated woman, but the voice I heard seemed sharp and short-tempered. Susan appeared to be panicking and getting frustrated with the situation not going her way. I could hear my ex-husband trying to calm Susan down. "Susan, it's okay. Marcia will sort it out for us." "Don't make assumptions," I grimaced unintentionally. How self-centered can someone be? He resented my abilities and gossiped about me, but now in his time of need, he expected me to bail him out. "I'm not your wife anymore, and I have no obligation to help you," I said firmly. "Marcia, don't be like that, okay?" His voice was the sweet-talking kind. When I used to love him, I was weak for that voice. I often let his whims slide. But now I stood firm and spoke clearly. "You said marrying me was a mistake, right?" He seemed to struggle to respond. His stammering was overlaid by Susan's yelling. "Do something about it," I thought to myself. "I thought you were rich because of this fancy house." "You came after me for my money?" I asked, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. Obviously, what else would there be? Susan snapped back sharply. My ex-husband argued with Susan for a while, but then I heard a door close. Susan seemed to have left the room. My ex-husband spoke over the phone, his voice now completely tearful. "I was wrong. It wasn't a mistake marrying you. The mistake was leaving you," he said, his words hitting me like a punch to the gut. "Well, that's how it is. I feel relieved that we split up," I said, trying to maintain my composure. And with that, I hung up the call. At work, the ghost calls from my ex-husband continued, but I didn't respond. He said Susan had left. He looked like a different person in just 1 month, haggard and unkempt. His clothes were dirty, and he seemed not to have changed them for days. Maybe he hadn't even bathed. "And now I have to pay child support with no job," he complained. "You should, it's your child after all," I replied, feeling a sense of bitterness towards him. My ex-husband was standing with his arms crossed at Michael's house entrance. "This is my son's house. You betrayed us once, and you still have the nerve to show up," I said, my anger boiling over. "I came to talk to my son," he said, his tone defensive. "You're no help at all," I retorted, not backing down. No matter how feeble he looked, his spiteful nature was intact. And then my ex-husband called out over my shoulder to Michael. "Hey, Michael, it's me, your dad. I need to talk to you," he said, his voice loud and demanding. "Hey, keep it down," I said, feeling embarrassed by his behavior. I was shocked by his loud voice, not caring about being a neighborhood nuisance. Sure enough, neighbors peered out their windows, wondering what was going on. "Dad, cut it out." Michael came to the door. I tried to stop him, but he was visibly upset. "I got something to say to Dad, too." "This is perfect." Saying so, he faced his father. My clueless ex-husband's expression brightened. "Michael, what is it, Dad?" Michael stood protectively between me and my ex-husband. "You're gonna have a new sister or brother soon." Michael's reaction was totally reasonable. The idea of having a sibling as old as his own child was just bizarre. But my ex-husband, oblivious to this, went on. "I need money for the baby to be born safely. But I'm out of work right now, see? Could you lend me some?" "I'll pay you back, of course." "Get real." Michael dismissed him outright. My ex-husband recoiled a few steps. Michael continued in a stern voice and expression. "Dad, please don't disappoint me any further. I don't want a brother or sister, and even if one is made, I won't acknowledge them. Isn't it just a child you made with your mistress? They have nothing to do with us, our family. Don't say things like that. I was wrong, I admit it. But the child isn't to blame, right? Just go home." I couldn't help but raise my voice. How much longer do I have to listen to his selfish claims? I can't let Michael be troubled by this. You have no relationship with us anymore. Please just leave, Nick. I said it in a businesslike tone. There couldn't be a clearer rejection. My ex-husband groaned and held his head. This isn't how it was supposed to be. He continued to visit the house reluctantly. In the end, we consulted with the police about my ex-husband. The officers responded promptly, and my ex-husband was finally recognized as a stalker. He was now barred from approaching his former family in any capacity. It's a lie, right? I can't get in touch with Susan, and I don't know what to do next. With the source of the gossip gone, the whispers about me also began to fade. I plan to become someone about whom no bad word can be heard. By the way, Marcia, what? One day I was called into the president's office. My brother, sitting in the chair, looked a bit troubled. I don't have a son to take over from me. I had thought of your husband for the role, but with him, that's not going to work. And we're divorced now, too. I shrugged my shoulders. My brother leaned forward slightly, looking me in the eye. How about it, Marcia? Would you consider taking over after me? I was flustered. Certainly there was an age difference between my brother and me. I was in my 50s, but my brother was nearing 70. But I've promised not to interfere with company management. Yes, until today you've kept that promise. Well, I trust your integrity, and that's why I want to entrust the future to you. Please let me think about it, I asked. He said he wouldn't force me, which I appreciated. I left the president's office. Meanwhile, I continued looking for an apartment. But in the end, I decided to continue living with Michael and his wife. It was Michael's wife who offered this. I really appreciate having you at home. Really? I was surprised by her unexpected words. Michael's wife continued gently as if explaining. By myself, I just can't keep up with the childcare and household chores, and your help has been a lifesaver. Exactly. Michael joined the conversation. I help out when I'm home, but I just can't match the years of experience you have, Mom. You know exactly what to do around the house. Michael, you too. I was overwhelmed with happiness. Living with my son and his wife was also a source of comfort for me. I could feel my heart, which had been trampled by my ex-husband, slowly healing. Are you both really okay with this? Of course. We look forward to continuing this, Mom. Michael and his wife both smiled welcomingly at me. While working, I shared household duties with Michael's wife. They never forget to express their gratitude for even the small things. Hey, meatloaf today? My favorite. Thanks for remembering, Mom. I learned some cooking tips from you, Marcia. Your time-saving techniques are really something. Thank you. It's nothing. I blushed with modesty as we ate dinner. Afterward, it was time to play with my granddaughter. This was my favorite time. My granddaughter, resembling her father, evoked a sense of nostalgia in me. While enjoying the unique scent of baby milk, I lifted her up. She laughed innocently. She laughs a lot. She's like Michael when he was little. Really? Yes. I squinted with nostalgia, and Michael's wife laughed. That's surprising. Michael frowned. Mom, please stop. It's embarrassing. What's wrong with that? We're family after all. I said it with a heart full of contentment. What a warm thing to say out loud. Michael and his wife looked at each other happily. The baby seemed sleepy and began to close her eyes. I am happy now. And one more thing. By the way, I have something I want you two to hear. What is it? Next year, I'm gonna take over from my brother. Life will probably get busier, but also more fulfilling. I smiled at the thought of the future. Grandma, it's hot in here. Let me out of the room. No way. I'm going to go shopping now. You're gonna stay here and watch the house. As the daughter attempted to leave the room with her mother-in-law, she was gently shoved back in. The 5-year-old daughter, who usually attends kindergarten, has to rely on her in-laws on Sundays when work comes up unexpectedly. Thus, the daughter was left in the care of her grandmother-in-law, who, though she took her in, didn't seem inclined to look after her. The room into which the grandmother-in-law pushed the girl was originally used by her husband. Now it's more like a storage room, with nothing suitable for a child to play with. Additionally, it's on the second floor with a large window, making it feel stuffy, even with the window open due to the heat. Today, a heat stroke warning was issued, and the sealed room had surpassed 95 degrees Fahrenheit. In such conditions, the grandmother-in-law cheerfully grabs the air conditioner remote. Time to save some energy. She declares without hesitation and presses the button to turn off the air conditioner. She then slams the door shut and blocks it with a pile of magazines so the girl can't leave the room. My name is Alice. I'm 32 years old. I live in an apartment not far from my in-laws' place with my husband, David, who's 3 years older than me, and our 5-year-old daughter, Summer. My father-in-law passed away less than a year after Summer was born. Currently, my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law, April, live together in the in-laws' house. April, in her 20s, lived on her own, but returned home after the death of our father-in-law to take care of her mother. Being close in age, April and I get along like real sisters. Though I have a good relationship with April, and we meet regularly, I can't say the same for my mother-in-law, who is the head of the household. She dotes on her son and daughter and seems jealous that I stole her son by marrying him. When I was pregnant, her demeanor changed drastically upon learning the baby was a girl. "Why is it a girl?" she exclaimed, loud enough for the unborn baby to hear. I was too shocked to respond. At that time, David scolded her, saying, "Mom, why say such things when we're welcoming a new family member? It's your first grandchild, gender doesn't matter." But his mother just sulked without showing any remorse. Later, April came to apologize, saying, "Alice, I heard Mom say some terrible things. I'm really sorry because of such incidents. Due to such incidents, my mother-in-law not only treats me, but also little Summer as a nuisance." David and April have tried to correct her behavior, but to no avail. As both David and I work, there are times when we have to leave Summer with my in-laws. However, observing my mother-in-law's daily attitude, I find it difficult to fully trust her. She doesn't hold Summer in high regard. And before I married David, he told me about a time when she almost let her dog die by leaving it in a room with the air conditioning turned off during the peak of summer. At that time, my father-in-law was still alive, and he immediately noticed and took the dog to the vet, saving its life before it passed away from old age. Despite being severely scolded by my father-in-law, my mother-in-law didn't seem truly remorseful, which is why I can't help but worry that she might inadvertently do something similar again. Currently, it is the height of summer, and the heat is so intense that even adults are struggling. Naturally, a 5-year-old like Summer needs air conditioning in this scorching weather. That's why every time I leave her with my in-laws during the summer, I make sure to remind them to keep the air conditioning on. However, every time I mention it, my mother-in-law sighs in exasperation and says things like, "Goodness, what a waste of electricity." Each time I'm left feeling cramped and uncomfortable. Thankfully, my sister-in-law April comes to my defense against such snide remarks from my mother-in-law. "Don't say that to Alice, Mom," April says. "The AC isn't a waste in the summer, right? If we're all in the same room, one is enough. Besides, you leave the electricity on for things you're not even using." "Oh, really?" my mother-in-law responds. "Yes, just yesterday, you left the TV on without watching it. And after your bath, you left all the lights on in the bathroom and the changing room. If you're going to preach about saving electricity, you should start with yourself," April points out. I am aware of my mother-in-law's bad habits, but it seems unlikely that they will ever change. Despite her grumbling, I am grateful to April for gladly looking after Summer. April works a job with little overtime and always steps up to care for Summer. Summer has been attending daycare since she was 3 and is not frequently left with my in-laws. I try not to rely on them because of my mother-in-law's attitude, but depending on the time of year, David and I often work late, and sometimes we get called in to work unexpectedly on weekends. When that happens and daycare is not open on Sunday, we have no choice but to ask my in-laws for help. One late July Sunday, both David and I had work commitments and had to go to our respective jobs. David knows that my mother-in-law does not think kindly of me or Summer and is always considerate. However, on this day, we had no choice but to have my mother-in-law look after Summer. "Summer, be good at Grandma's house, okay?" I said to Summer, patting her head after waving David off. "Okay, I understand." She nodded meekly, but wouldn't look up at my mother-in-law. She's always been an easy child, but seeing her go into the house obediently following my words, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. I could tell that even at her young age, Summer felt disliked by my mother-in-law, which made me feel sorry for her. "I'm sorry. I'll try to finish work as early as possible and come to pick up Summer. And there's a heat advisory today, so please take care of yourself. Turn on the AC early and stay hydrated. And make sure you drink your tea, Summer," I said. Recently, the temperatures have been exceeding 86 degrees Fahrenheit, but today it was especially hot. With this heat, my mother-in-law should not hesitate to use the AC, but when I stressed it, she clearly showed her annoyance. I know that. Geez, having to look after that child in this heat. I wish you'd consider my situation a bit, she complained blatantly. Sorry, I apologized and bowed my head, determined to finish my tasks quickly and pick up Summer as soon as possible before leaving my in-laws' house. But later, I would regret not being more alert to my mother-in-law's attitude. 3 hours after leaving Summer, I finished work and was heading to my in-laws when I received a call on my cell phone. It was from Summer. Before leaving her with my in-laws, I had given her a child's cell phone, just in case. Hello, Summer? I answered with a sense of foreboding. Mommy came her frail, frightened voice. Hey, when are you gonna come get me? I'm on my way now. I'll be there soon, just wait for me, I reassured her as I walked down the sidewalk. Then, with a voice that seemed rushed, Summer said, please, come quick. Something feels off. When I asked her what was wrong, she fell silent. As I began to sweat despite the heat, worried that my mother-in-law might have done something to Summer, she pleaded with a tearful voice, Mommy, help. Realizing this was no small matter, I rushed to my in-laws' house without waiting for further details from Summer. Upon arrival, my mother-in-law was nowhere to be seen, possibly out shopping. But Summer's shoes were at the entrance, so she must be inside. She wasn't on the first floor, so I went upstairs and saw a pile of magazines blocking a door. It was the room David used to use when he lived at home. With a bad feeling, I quickly removed the magazines and opened the door, only to be faced with a shocking situation. Sometime later, my mother-in-law returned home in high spirits, 3 hours after I had left Summer at their house. However, upon seeing an ambulance parked in front of the house and someone being carried into it, her expression instantly changed. What the heck is going on here? She screamed, running over to us with a look of horror. David had just arrived, so all three of us, including Summer, were there. Then my mother-in-law shoved us aside and screamed towards the ambulance. April. Oh, why, what happened? Yes, it was April who had just been rushed into the ambulance. Limp and unresponsive to her mother's cries. Why is it not Summer but April who's in this state? My mother-in-law, failing to understand, glared at Summer clinging to me. I felt a surge of anger at her attitude, but David stepped forward before I could respond. So was your doing, Mom? Eh? What are you talking about? She feigned ignorance, looking away. Don't play dumb. We know you turned off the AC and locked Summer in the room, I pressed. Caught, my mother-in-law seemed to realize her mistake and began to stutter. I had just heard from Summer that my mother-in-law had intentionally locked her in the upstairs room and turned off the AC. The upstairs room gets much hotter than downstairs, reaching over 95 degrees when sealed. She must have known what could happen to a 5-year-old in such conditions. Her actions were beyond mere harassment, and I was horrified. Despite Summer's pleas not to stay in the hot room, my mother-in-law left her there and went out shopping. Fortunately, Summer was safe. It turned out that my mother-in-law thought she had turned off the AC in Summer's room, but she had actually turned off the one in the next room. She probably mixed up the remotes, which she is careless with and never puts back in place. There were times when the living room TV remote turned up in her room, or the AC remote from her car. She used the remotes for adjacent rooms interchangeably without returning them, which likely led to this confusion. That next room belonged to April. April, who had been sleeping, was subjected to a room like a steam bath after the AC was turned off and suffered heat stroke. When the paramedics asked if someone could accompany April, my mother-in-law was the first to raise her hand. But David strongly objected. Whose fault do you think this is? He shouted at her. David took advantage of her momentary shock and boarded the ambulance. My mother-in-law, watching him began to cry out. April, hold on. Oh, if only Summer had been the one to get heat stroke instead. Unable to tolerate my mother-in-law's selfish remarks, my anger reached its peak. Before I could rebuke her, one of the paramedics scolded her. Enough is enough. Don't you realize what happens when you turn off the AC in this blazing heat? You need to take a deep look at the seriousness of this life-threatening situation. Reflect on what you've done, he admonished. What do you mean? Don't interfere in someone else's family affairs. I never meant to kill anyone. I properly left the remote in her room. My mother-in-law retorted defiantly to the paramedic's scolding, leaving me speechless. I realized that nothing I said would make a difference to this woman. And at the same time, I knew I could never forgive my unrepentant mother-in-law. After watching the ambulance with April and David leave, I decided to take Summer back to my parents' house. My mother-in-law, unable to join them in the ambulance, apparently went to the hospital on her own later. Fortunately, April was not in danger for her life and was able to return home in good health the next day after receiving N4. Relieved that there were no lasting effects, I was just about to exhale when my mother-in-law summoned Summer and me back to her house. David also seemed to have his grievances with his mother, so the three of us went to the in-laws' house together. After such an uproar, I didn't want to bring Summer, but I couldn't leave a 5-year-old alone at home. No matter what my mother-in-law might say, I intended to protect Summer with all my might. As soon as we arrived, my mother-in-law yelled at me and ordered me to kneel and apologize to April. If you hadn't left Summer here, none of this would have happened. It's your responsibility, so apologize to April right now, she demanded unreasonably. Astonished by her blatant blame-shifting, I calmly advised her, please don't yell. Summer is scared. But with her face red with anger, my mother-in-law yelled, shut up. I can't stand the sight of such a child. If she had died from heat stroke, maybe a boy would have been born next, hurling these cruel words at Summer. How could you say such a thing? I couldn't help but shout back at her while holding Summer tight. Caught off guard by my response, my mother-in-law faltered for a moment, but then she glared at us with a scowl. Don't talk back to me. A daughter-in-law should know her place. Apologize right now. That's when April said, what are you saying? Stop it already, stepping in front of me to shield me from our mother-in-law. It's because Summer called Alice for help that I didn't end up worse. If Alice hadn't come and called the ambulance, I would have been in much more serious condition. April said, furiously glaring at our mother-in-law. I had never seen April so angry. Our mother-in-law seemed shocked too, being yelled at by her usually doting daughter. When Summer called me for help, saying she was locked in a room, I rushed over immediately. But after listening to Summer, there were some puzzling points. She mentioned that our mother-in-law pressed something on a remote in front of her, and Summer heard a loud noise from the next room. It was assumed that the remote was used to turn off the AC, but that didn't explain how Summer was comfortably cool in her room. Then, after hearing about the noise from the next room, I had a hunch. Could our mother-in-law have mistakenly turned off the AC in April's room next door? April had said she was off today. Could that noise have been April calling for help? With that thought, even though I felt it might just be my imagination, I instructed Summer. Summer, press the blue button on the remote. When I arrived at the in-laws' house, I found Summer locked in the room and quickly got her out. In the next room, April was on the floor, her body incredibly hot. While waiting for the ambulance, I gave her water and listened to her story. April said she hadn't been sleeping well due to work lately. She had fallen into a deep sleep because it was her day off on Sunday, but woke up feeling unbearably hot and realized she was suffering from heat stroke. She tried to call for help with her smartphone, which was charging far from her bed, but couldn't move well due to nausea and dizziness. The AC remote, which should have been in her room, was nowhere to be found. She managed to move, but collapsed after falling from the bed. The noise Summer heard was the sound of April falling from the bed. Fortunately, because I had Summer press the AC button and some time had passed, the room temperature had started to settle. However, being locked in a room that reached 95 degrees for a while, April's heat stroke had become severe. What if Summer had missed that sound? What if she thought it was just her imagination and hadn't told me? I might not have realized April was there, and in the worst case, she might have died. The thought was chilling. Even I almost died and you locked such a small child in that room. Don't you understand you should never do such a thing, no matter who it is? The one who should apologize is you, Mother, for trying to kill your granddaughter. Consider it grace. that you're not being sued for attempted murder. April scolded with tears in her eyes, but our mother-in-law remained silent. After a while, she kept repeating, but because she showed no intention to apologize, April gave her a cold look. It's no use talking to you anymore. I'm at my limit. After Dad died, I stayed because I was worried about you, but I can't forgive you for this, and I can't live in fear anymore. I'll be moving out soon, April declared, which finally changed our mother-in-law's expression. What are you saying? Haven't I always cared for you and David? You two are my precious family, my mother-in-law protested, her face turning pale. Who nearly killed that precious family member? April snapped back at her, but the mother-in-law began to understand the gravity of her actions, began to have a hysterical fit, banging on the table. David then said to our mother-in-law, family isn't just us. Or are you saying Alice and Summer aren't part of our family? His voice shaking with anger. To David's question, our mother-in-law snorted defiantly and looked at me with a mocking smile. They're not family, obviously. That daughter-in-law and granddaughter, they're not connected to me by blood, she said, making it clear that to her, Summer and I were never family from the start. But strangely, I wasn't as shocked as I might have been. After all, Summer is her granddaughter. There is a blood connection. But even so, I didn't feel the need to correct her. April seemed to feel the same way, sighing deeply and staring at our mother-in-law with an expressionless face. It seems useless to say anything more. I'll be packing up and leaving soon. You'll have to take care of everything yourself after that, April said decisively. This sent our mother-in-law into a frenzy, and she clung to April's arm, wailing and crying. No, don't decide on your own. You're gonna live here with me forever. It's you who shouldn't make decisions on your own. How about growing up and letting go of your children? I'm taking this opportunity to cut ties with you. Don't contact me ever again. April's resolve was firm, and she shook off our mother-in-law's grip, showing her rejection. Oh no, April. Seemingly overwhelmed by the shock, our mother-in-law screamed, and then, carried away by her emotions, she ran out of the house. I later found out that our mother-in-law had been going around the neighborhood acting as if she was the victim, spreading rumors that it was all my fault. The next day, while out with my family, I received a call from my mother-in-law. As soon as I answered, she began to shout so loudly it hurt my ears, and I immediately wanted to end the call. Before I could ask why she was calling, she started ranting about something that had happened today. Apparently, the breaker at her house had been tripped without her realizing it, and all the food in her fridge had gone bad. It seems that everything in the freezer had melted into a huge mess. Additionally, my mother-in-law was enraged because a TV drama she had been looking forward to recording was not taped, and she was convinced that I was the only one who could be responsible. You did this, didn't you? How far will you go with your harassment? No, I don't know anything about that. The TV was on normally when we left, wasn't it? We haven't been back since then, so it's impossible for us to have done it, I replied, but my mother-in-law kept accusing me. You and Summer are such a nuisance. Just divorce David already and go somewhere far away, the both of you. My mother-in-law had lost all composure and was now demanding a divorce. Divorce, as if it wasn't enough that she was bad-mouthing me. What had Summer ever done to her? She had conjured up this whole idea that David had been taken from her, was jealous for no reason, and now she was demanding a divorce. I wanted to scream back at her, but there were a lot of people around. I didn't want to cause a scene in front of my family or others, so I took a deep breath to calm down. I deeply care about David, and I intend to continue living with him and Summer as a family of 3. Please don't talk nonsense about us getting a divorce, I stated clearly. And though you are David's mother, I have no desire to associate with someone who intentionally causes pain to others, I added, asking her not to be involved with us anymore. Still, my mother-in-law continued to scream irrational things, and I was about to hang up when my phone was taken by a hand reaching from the side. It was April who had taken my phone and started talking to our mother-in-law. Hello, Mom? Yes, it's April. Actually, it was me who turned off the breaker. It must have saved on the electricity bill for the night, right? April explained with a smile. What, April? Why? My mother-in-law's voice was loud enough to be heard without putting the phone to my ear. She was confused about why April was with me and why she would do something like turning off the house's breaker. Mom, I've told you many times about not leaving the electricity on when you're not using it, haven't I? You always demand others to save but leave it on yourself. Even when I left, the TV and all the lights were on. Didn't I ask you if I should turn everything off because it's wasteful? You said it was okay. So I turned it off? It saved electricity, so it's all good, right? April said, her face bright with relief. What do you mean it's not okay? Have to replace all the food now. It's irreplaceable. April, come back home right now. It's fine. You can just buy it again, right? Maybe next time, you'll get better ingredients. Mom, you always said saving electricity was more important than human lives, so I was just helping out. Anyway, I don't care anymore, so goodbye. I won't contact you again, but take care. April continued, ignoring our mother-in-law's cries, and ended the call. Sorry for talking so long. She apologized as she handed back my phone, and I shook my head. No, I feel much better now. I replied, it's almost time to board, isn't it? Take care over there. It's still hot these days, so watch your health. I told her as April nodded with a smile. April was moving far away today. Right now, I'm at the airport seeing her off with my family of 3. April had decided long ago to leave the overprotective care of our mother-in-law. The place she chose to move to is far from my mother-in-law's reach. April's face was bright as she embarked on her journey to her new world, and we waved her off with smiles. Since then, we've been keeping in touch with April, updating each other on our lives. She seems to be enjoying life in her new world, living each day with vigor. Shortly after April's departure, we also moved and started a new life in our new home. We didn't give our mother-in-law our new address and blocked her number, cutting off all ties, which has made our life considerably more comfortable. David had also been quite distressed by his mother's smothering love, but being her son, he had never been able to push her away until now. After the recent uproar, he decided it was time to make a clean break. My mother-in-law has become isolated from the community because she deliberately put Summer's life in danger and tried to deceive the neighbors with lies and slander about me. We moved without her knowledge, and since April also left home, my mother-in-law has no one to rely on. She seems to be living a lonely and depressed life, subsisting on my father-in-law's inheritance without any financial power. Whatever path she chooses to walk from here on out is beyond our knowledge. Oh, by the way, April mentioned she wants to come visit soon, I remembered. Just the other day, during a phone call, April invited us to her place, saying that she had settled into her new home and wanted us to visit. Let's use the long weekend next month to go see her. David agreed enthusiastically, and Summer, thrilled at the idea, exclaimed, I want to go. I want to ride on a plane. We're all looking forward to it. When we meet, I plan to tell her that she's going to have a new nephew. From now on, I want us to live a happy life as a family of 4, watching over Summer's growth and welcoming the new baby boy into our lives. Don't cook dog food in front of the relatives. John mocks me with a loud laugh. I'm at a loss for words at such a harsh insult. That stuff looks so unappetizing. There's no better way to describe it than dog food. Just redo it, will you? I immediately retort to John's words. Huh? But I'm still shopping. What? John seems puzzled, but I don't care. It's my own way of getting back at him. I'm Elizabeth Green, about to turn 50 this year. I have a daughter who's moved out, so it's just me and my husband, John, at home. John works at a major job advertising firm, well known due to its frequent commercials. He's very ambitious, influenced by his surroundings. A man's worth is measured by his salary. His salary, that's his mantra. He seems to be working late every night to boost his income. I've been quietly supporting his hard work. I met John through a friend's introduction. I work from home, so I don't have many opportunities to meet men. The last time I had a boyfriend was in college. A concerned friend introduced me to John through an acquaintance. My first impression of John was that he was refreshing and handsome. He always looked sharp in his suit with a stylish haircut. To someone like me, who doesn't dress up much, he seemed from a different world. But John, in his unpretentious way, said, I'm busy with work and can't meet often, but I'll cherish you. Let's shake on it. Yes, I replied, instantly falling for him with a handshake. We started going out more often together. Our dates, however, were always just quick meals or coffee because John was always short on time. Often, his phone would ring during our dates, and we'd have to cut them short. It's work. Sorry, but I gotta head to the office. We'll make it up later, John would say, getting up from his seat. I was sad, but I understood it was his job. I accepted that. Then came John's proposal. I said yes with a smile, naively believing happy days were ahead. I had no idea that this was just the beginning of what would be 25 years of hardship. Lately, John's been coming home late. Since the early days of our marriage, he's always worked overtime, coming home only late at night. He wouldn't even eat the meals I prepared, just coming home to sleep. We hardly ever talked. That's why, early in our marriage, I once suggested to John, "Can't you come home a bit earlier? Let's have dinner together sometimes." John snapped, "Since when can you tell me what to do? Think you're better than me now?" His irritated expression shocked me. I didn't mean that. I'm sorry, I apologized immediately. I was terribly shaken, having little experience with relationships. But John wouldn't forgive me. Acting all high and mighty on your little income. "Don't get cocky with your part-time job," he said, and locked himself in the room. John didn't speak to me for about a week. I deeply regretted it, so I stopped asking him to come home early. John, with his old-fashioned mindset, would often say, "A woman should be 3 steps behind and silent. You should respect and obey me." I had lost my parents to illness early on, so I didn't really know what a normal family was like. But I was deeply in love with John back then and didn't want to break up over something like this. So I had no choice but to obediently agree with whatever John said. John was a very kind man before we got married, always considerate of me. He never forced me to speak formally or look down on me. I kept hoping he would return to the man he was before we got married. That hope was all I had to cling to every day. But after 25 years, John never went back to how he was before our marriage. I was crushed by despair, but somehow managed to get through each day. Then one day I'm home. Tired, I'm gonna take a bath. John said, yawning as he came home. "Welcome home. The bath's ready." I hurried to greet him. It was 2 a.m. He must have come back by taxi. I was tidying up his shoes when I felt something odd. There was a faint scent of perfume from John's shoes, a scent I had never smelled before. John always wore cologne before going to work, but this was different. I wanted to confront him right away, but he was already in the bath. And if I did, he would probably just get angry. The perfume alone wasn't enough evidence. Reluctantly, I decided not to ask him about it. Weeks passed, and the unfamiliar scent of perfume still lingered on John's shoes. By then, my feelings for John had cooled. A man who might be cheating, I wanted nothing to do with him. John probably looked down on me anyway. He probably thought I wouldn't bring up divorce, and a quiet divorce might not even affect him much. I didn't take any overt actions. Then one day, John suddenly spoke to me. "Next Sunday, we're having a family dinner at my parents' house. You better help my mom out on the day." "Yes," I replied. At John's family home, it was a tradition to gather and have a meal together every Thanksgiving. I had always gone early in the morning to help my mother-in-law. She prided herself on cooking the meals, while I mainly helped with cleaning and tidying up. Since my father-in-law passed away last year, we had skipped the dinner. As I thought about this, John talked happily. "Emily's coming home after a long time, isn't she?" Emily is our only daughter. Currently, she's away at college. John absolutely adores her, the only person he seems to truly care for. "Yes," I answered him curtly. Then came the family dinner with relatives. I had been busy since morning preparing at my in-laws' house. I diligently cleaned the living room, the venue for the event. "My back went out the other day, Elizabeth. I feel bad you have to do so much," my mother-in-law said. She's fragile in appearance and very kind to me. A stark contrast to John. In the midst of all this, John arrived at his parents' house. "Are you helping Mom properly? She's got a bad back, so make sure you take care of the relatives." John said this with a boisterous laugh. "John," his mother scolded him, but he seemed unfazed. It's all so noisy. I just wish Emily would hurry up and get here." With that, he went off to his old room. likely planning to relax there until the event started. That's when my mother-in-law asked me to buy more alcohol. Yes, I'll go now, I said and hurried to the supermarket. While I was buying a large amount of alcohol, my phone rang. It was John. I sighed, feeling dismayed, but I couldn't ignore the call. Hello? I answered the phone reluctantly. It sounded like John was already in the living room, with a lot of background noise. Probably the relatives had started arriving at his parents' house. Then John said something unbelievable. Don't make dog food in front of the relatives. He laughed mockingly as he insulted me. Huh? I was confused by John's words. I threw all the dinner out into the yard. He was loud. Because John spoke so loudly, I could hear a relative saying, "John, that's too rude to your wife." The food looked delicious. And throwing it into the yard, what a waste. I didn't know how to respond to such a terrible insult. John didn't care about my feelings or those of anyone else. That food looked so unappetizing. It's nothing but dog food. Just remake it? John jeered at me with a loud laugh. I immediately replied to John, "Huh? I'm still shopping, you know? So there's no way I could serve dinner right now." What? John sounded confused. I'm at the supermarket right now, and it's a 40-minute drive from here. There's no way I can cook right now. John didn't seem to accept my argument. Then who made this meal? It's steaming, obviously fresh. My mother-in-law said she didn't make it, so it must be you. John sounded bewildered, but I didn't care. Anyway, I'll be heading back now. We can talk about it later. With those words, I ended the call with John. Whatever hell John was about to face, it didn't matter to me. He would probably regret it terribly, but that's just fine. I'm back now. I returned to my in-laws' house with the bags of alcohol from the supermarket. Elizabeth, I'm so sorry to trouble you, my mother-in-law said apologetically. She must have heard John's rude remarks earlier. She looked a bit uneasy. Then, as I was helping my mother-in-law, John came storming into the entrance. As soon as he saw me, he started yelling, "Cut it out with your nonsense, claiming you didn't make that unappetizing meal. Your cooking is not fit for humans anyway." John, that's so rude to say to Elizabeth. His mother scolded him, but it didn't seem to affect him. You should really teach Elizabeth how to be a proper wife, Mom. That's why she can never make a decent meal. John said this arrogantly, his face brimming with confidence. It's unbelievable how much he belittles others. I let out a heavy sigh at John's terrible character. What's that? John seemed irritated by my sigh, glaring at me intensely. No need to show any mercy to someone who looks down on others like this. I plan to bring him down thoroughly. So with a smile I said, the meal today wasn't actually made by me. Shall I call the person who did make it? John looked puzzled. You can come out now. I called to the person hiding. The person I had waiting in another room came out. John's face went pale, his body trembling. Dad, I'm sorry for making dog food. There stood Emily, John's beloved daughter. No, that's a misunderstanding. I thought Elizabeth made it. But why did you hide and cook? John asked Emily, flustered. I asked Emily to do it. I told John, Elizabeth, what have you done? Mom, did you know about this? His mother nodded, her face pale. I asked my mother-in-law to keep it a secret. I wanted to surprise you. She knew how much John adored Emily. So when I said I wanted to surprise John with Emily's cooking, she happily agreed. I can't wait to see John's surprised face, she had said excitedly. I felt bad for deceiving such an enthusiastic mother-in-law. She thought John and I were getting along well. That's probably why she was so shaken by what was happening. I explained everything to my bewildered mother-in-law. Unfortunately, John and I aren't getting along at all. His life is just about coming home to sleep, and on top of that, he's been cheating. My mother-in-law's face turned pale upon hearing this. Hey, don't say things like that. John yelled at me. Do you want proof? I handed John an envelope filled with documents. What's this? He muttered, beginning to read the documents. His face turned ashen as he read. As I read, I said firmly, It seems you didn't notice, but lately there's been a strong scent of women's perfume. So I hired a private investigator, and honestly, the amount of evidence that came up was shocking. I had always thought John's late returns were due to work. However, the investigator's findings revealed that it was due to his affairs. It seems John had been making advances to women at work and business partners. Even the phone calls during our dates were with other women. I spoke to John in a calm voice. It's amazing, isn't it? While I was balancing work and taking care of our home and child, John was out having fun with other women. Hit with the truth, John's face showed frustration and he fell silent. Ignoring John, I continued speaking. But recently you need to gift brand bags to have an affair with girls, huh? They won't pay attention to you unless you spend money. How pitiful. Is that why you've been stingy with the household expenses lately? John had been reluctant to contribute to household expenses recently. He said, "Now that Emily has moved out, we don't need that much for household expenses." No matter how much I argued, he wouldn't give any, so I had to cover them with my income. It turned out he was using the money for his affairs. The relatives who had gathered at the entrance by then were appalled. John having such a good wife and still cheating, that's despicable for a man, they said with disgusted expressions. I firmly declared to John, "I'm divorcing you, John. Why don't you remarry one of your mistresses? Of course I'll be taking a fair amount of alimony." John was visibly shaken by the mention of divorce. "Don't divorce me. I've spent most of my savings on my mistresses, so there's barely anything left. I can't afford a divorce." I was astounded by his selfish reasoning. Indeed, the private investigator's report showed John spending on high-end restaurants and brand bags for his affairs. Even with a job at a major company, there's no way he could have savings left after spending like that. "You are the worst," the relative said, looking at him coldly. Emily glared at John in silence. John seemed to finally realize the atmosphere around him, looking somewhat uncomfortable. I began to speak to John dispassionately. "Do you really think such a selfish reason will hold up? And it seems you're relying on my income now, but you've always looked down on my work-from-home job, haven't you?" "A home-based job is just a side gig. I working at a major company am much more significant in society," John stated proudly. Clearly, he had no remorse for his past actions, and still looked down on my job. It was time to shatter his pride. I dropped a bombshell. I'm a freelance engineer. While my income fluctuates, it's about the same as yours annually. What? What do you mean? John was utterly bewildered. After graduating from an online university, I landed a job at a major telecommunications company and later went independent. I've been able to secure projects due to my career experience. Without a decent income, I couldn't have maintained our lifestyle, especially since you haven't been contributing to the household expenses recently. John slumped down crestfallen. Elizabeth is earning as much as me. It seems John was taken aback by the amount of my income, much more than he expected. He's clearly in a state of shock. In truth, I could have divorced you earlier, but I didn't want to make Emily live with a single parent. That might have complicated her marriage prospects. Continued, Emily was still single, and I didn't want her marriage prospects to be affected. So I had been hesitant to initiate a divorce. Suddenly, John looked at Emily and pleaded, clinging to her. "Emily, you don't want your mom and dad to divorce, do you? Please say something to Elizabeth." He was desperately trying to find words, but Emily looked at him coldly. "Emily?" John was clearly confused. Emily sighed deeply and said, "I'm disappointed in you, Dad. I want Mom to be happy and divorce you. It's okay if I marry someone who doesn't mind having a single parent. I don't care about you anymore." Emily turned her eyes away from John. When I had explained everything to Emily, she was furious, saying, "I don't need a dad who's always cheating and doesn't even provide for the family. So, go ahead and do what you need to, Mom. I'll support you." She had encouraged, leading to this moment. John always had something to complain about everything I did. So, I expected him to make some nasty comment when I served dinner. Indeed, his reaction was more extreme than I anticipated, which probably accelerated Emily distancing herself from her father. "Please don't give up on me," John pleaded, tears streaming down his face, rejected by his beloved Emily. What a pitiable man, I muttered to myself. Both my mother-in-law and the relatives were keeping their distance from John. No one was there to console him. A natural consequence of his past actions. John remained crying in the same spot for a while. Afterward, my divorce from John was finalized, but it wasn't easy. John vehemently opposed. He vehemently opposed the divorce at the law firm, insisting that he would never agree to it. Apparently, he didn't want a divorce because he had no money left. However, the evidence of his affairs was overwhelming. When I declared that if he didn't agree to the divorce, I would increase the alimony, his face turned pale. He was sweating profusely and finally said, "I'm sorry, I'll agree to the divorce." After the divorce, John was dumped by his mistresses because he had no money left to give them what they wanted. I also claimed alimony from the mistresses, who were only interested in John for his money. But now that he was penniless, they had no interest in him. So, John was left alone, living a very lonely life. Even Emily cut off contact with him, saying, "I can't forgive someone who cheats as a father," and blocked his calls. His relatives did the same, distancing themselves after his affair was exposed. John, through his lawyer, tearfully apologized, saying, "I'm so sorry. I'm all alone now, every day is so lonely. Please let's start over. Then Emily and Mom will treat me as before." John must have been desperate to say such things. Being alone in his 50s must be hard, but it's all his own doing. I hope he reflects on his actions. I firmly requested my lawyer to convey my refusal to reconsider the relationship. Time passed and the end of the year arrived. I moved out of the house I shared with John, using the alimony as a down payment for a condo. The apartment is a 2-bedroom with a living room, dining area, and kitchen, ideal for someone living alone. Today, Emily had come home for a visit. "Do you want to go see Dad?" I asked her, but Emily made a face of displeasure. "I never planned to forgive Dad. Besides, spending New Year's with just you and Mom sounds more enjoyable," she said with a bright smile. Life with John was indeed challenging, but having Emily made it bearable. "She is my treasure." "Thank you, Emily," I said to her, filled with gratitude. Blushing slightly, she replied, "I'm really glad you're my mom." "Thank you." After the divorce, I wondered what would become of us, but my work remained steady, and I had Emily. I'm not considering remarriage yet, but there's time to think about it slowly. My second chapter in life has just begun. With the new year dawning, I vowed to keep striving forward.